All right, so today we're going to be going over 6.6 simple interest. There is a couple things that I'd like you to write down before we start the lesson for today. So if you would pull out your red pen, go ahead and fill in whatever you see here that is red in a red pen. Okay, so the new formula today that you are writing down in that cloud that's there to the left is I equals P times R times T. Everyone say I equals P R T. All right, so if you haven't yet, go ahead and put that into the fluffy cloud that's there on the left-hand side. Let's talk first off the I. What does the I stand for, class? Interest, okay? So this is how much money you make or how much money you owe. Raise your hand if you have a bank account at a bank, okay? What bank are you at, Cade? Bank of America, okay? There's other banks too. What other banks could you be at? All right, Wells Fargo. Yes, very good. So there's a lot of different banks. Many times we put our money into the bank, okay? So let's say I put $100 in there, and then the bank says, I will give you interest. Do you guys know what that means? It doesn't actually have to do with an interest like your likes or desires. It's a different kind of interest. This is money, and if I put my money into the bank and they are borrowing it from me, I actually make a little bit of money for keeping my money in the bank with them, okay? So they'll say, hey, if you keep this here for a little while, we will give you interest, okay? So it might be that I put $100 in and they say, I'll give you 2% interest if you keep it here for a year. Do you guys know what 2% of $100 is? $2, okay? Did I make a ton of money? No, but I made a little bit of money, and if it wasn't money I was going to use anyway, I can keep it in the bank and keep it there and make a little bit of money, okay? Now, there is times when you might have to go to the bank, especially your parents, might have to go and get a loan. How many of you know if your parents have ever had a loan before? What do you think they might take out a loan for? A house? A car, okay? So big, expensive things, all right? We might have to go to the bank and say, I don't have the money to buy this car, but I really want it. Could I get a loan from you? They say, sure, but you will have to pay interest. In that case, that would be how much money you owe back to the bank, okay? So the next thing is the P, the principal. What does the principal stand for? The starting amount. So let's say I say to the bank, I'm going to put $500 in your bank. That's my principal. That's how much I started off with. What does the R stand for? Rate, okay? Please make sure that you have written this part down. The rate is a percent that we will change to a decimal. And finally, the T stands for time, okay? So that's the time, and it's going to be time in years. I don't want it in months. I will always want it to be in years. So let's just imagine that I say something like, it took 6 months. Is that in years, yes or no? No. No, what's that in? Months. How much of a year is 6 months? A half. So here's how you can figure that out. If you didn't just know that at the top of your head, how many months are in a year? 12. So 6/12. Can 6/12 be reduced? What would that reduce to? 1/2. Okay, so 6 months is the same thing as a half of a year. If for some crazy reason it came to you in months, you would always want to change it to years. Okay, so I'm going to try to help you understand this a little better. Let's imagine that we had a problem and it says a $500 deposit will earn 6% simple annual interest for 4 years. What I want to know is which one's the principal, which one is the rate, and which one is the time. Let's do the easiest one first. Do you think the time is $500, 6%, or 4 years? 4 years. You are correct, all right? So the time is the easiest one to identify. Let's go ahead and write with our red pens, time in the blank. Now we're looking to see which one is the principal and which one is the rate. Which one do you think is the rate? 6%. How'd you know that? Rate will always be a percentage. So I can see right here that says 6%, so that has to be my rate. All right, so that leaves me with the $500. That was our starting amount. What is that starting amount called? That's the principal. So now let's imagine that I start with that formula. What was the formula that we wrote down in that fluffy cloud? I want everybody to write this down. I equals P, R, and T. So we're trying to find the I. What does the I stand for? Interest, okay? We'll do that by plugging these things in. PRT means P times R times T. What is my P or my principal? $500. Do we know what our R is? What is it? 6%. Now here's the deal. I want everyone to go back up to where it says R, rate. What does it say? The percent changed to a decimal. What would 6% be changed to a decimal? 0.06. So then I would be multiplying times 0.06. And do we know our time? 4 years. Then we would also multiply it by 4. I want you guys to put that into your calculators to help me figure out what the interest would be if I had a $500 deposit that earned a 6% rate for 4 years' time. Guys, what would the interest be? $120. Okay, so this is kind of like the problems that we will be working on and doing together as a class today. Let's look at the first example. Number 1. An account earns simple annual interest. Find the interest that's earned and the balance of the account. So I'm trying to find two things. First off, the interest, kind of like we just did, and then I'm also going to find the balance, the amount that I'm left with at the end. In order to do this, we have to know our formula. Guys, what's the formula? Excellent. So here's how I want us to do this, just to break it up and make sure we're understanding this. I want you to put an I, a P, an R, and a T. And I want you to put them right there in a straight line, one on top of the other one, okay? This says we have $500 at 3% for 3 years. Jada, do I know what the interest is? No, I don't. So I'm going to put a little question mark. We are looking to find what that interest is. Jonathan, do I know what the P is? What does P stand for? Principal. Do we know the principal? $500. So right there next to it, I'm going to say the principal is $500. Okay, do I know what the rate is that we got this at? Yes. What is it? 3%. And now remember, we want to change that to a decimal. So Cade, what would that be as a decimal? Excellent. And the next one, Tyler, do we know what our time is? What is it? 3 years. All right, so that's the hardest part, is figuring out, do I know the I, the P, the R, and the T? Let's start once again with our formula. I equals P times R times T. John, what is my I? We don't know it yet, so we're going to keep it as an I. Theron, what is my P? Okay, very good. So right here, I'm going to plug in 500 for the P. Lila, what's my R? Okay, we discovered, and thank you for remembering to turn it to a decimal, times 0.03. Theron, do we know the time? 3 years. Okay, so instead of a T there, we're going to go ahead and plug in 3 years. Now in order to discover what this is, you're just going to multiply those three things together. Jada, what do you get when you multiply those together? You are correct. So the interest is $45. But remember, up here in our instructions, it says find the interest and find the balance. So how much did they start off with in their bank account? $500. And how much did they earn? $45. Combine those together, and what is our balance? You are correct, $545. And that's the answer for the first problem. All right, the next problem, let's imagine that we need to borrow $300, okay? The bank tells us, sure, you can borrow it at a 5% rate for 9 months. So let's split this up. We've got our I, P, R, and T. Zoe, what's my I? We don't know it yet, so we'll just put a question mark. Christina, what's the P?
Not percent, my bad. It's $300.
$300, that's the principal or the starting amount. Jonathan, what's my rate? Okay, so it's 5%, but if I change that to a decimal, what would I get? There you go, 0.05. And Cade, what's the time that it tells us? Okay, so if it tells us 9 months, kind of like he just mentioned, it was 9 out of 12 months that it was taking, okay? And he already reduced it for us. What did he say it was reduced, class? 3/4. Okay, do you know what that would be as a decimal? 0.75, okay? Now, if you didn't have that memorized already, guys, could you figure that out? How would you find it out? Very good. 3 divided by 4 equals 0.75. Okay, now we're going to start plugging these things in. We've got our I equals P times R times T. Lila, what's my I? We don't know the I yet, okay? Lila, what's the P? Okay, that is our 300 because that's the starting amount that we had there. Theron, what's the R? .05. And Zoe, what's our time? 0.75. Now all you guys are going to do is just stick that in your calculators to find what the interest is. Tyler, what's the interest?
$311.
No, that's the balance. What's just the interest? When you multiply those together. $11.25. Okay, and then it sounded like you already had your balance. What did you say the balance was?
$311.25.
Very good. How'd you find that?
Added $11.25 to $300.
Very good. You added what you started with, the principal, and the interest together, and that gave you your new balance. Excellent job. For the next one, now this is asking us to find the annual interest rate. So we're going to be looking for our R. First thing we're going to do is separate the information I, P, R, and T. Now this is even easier because you can see here I labeled I, P, and T. All right. So Theron, do we know our interest? $100. Zoe, do we know our principal? $1,000. Jada, do we know our rate? No, so we're just going to put a question mark. And Christina, do we know our time? 4 years. Once again, it came to us in years, so we are very happy with that, okay? Let's start off with our formula. I equals P times R times T. Who would like to plug these in for me? Jada, what's the I? $100 equals, what's the P? 1,000. What's the R? Okay, we're going to keep it as an R, so that helps us to remember we've got to change that to a percentage, okay? We don't know the R, and that's why we keep it as an R. And what about the T? Times 4. All right, so let's first drop down that equal sign. Jada, is there any work I need to do on the left side over here? No, there's not, so drop down the 100. Is there any work that I can do over here on the right side?
Yes.
What could I do? Very good. We're going to take these numbers and multiply them together. What is 1,000 times 4? 4,000. And then drop down your R. Jada, how do I get that R by itself? Good job. We want to get R by itself, so we divide it by the number that's there that's not letting it be alone. Then we'll be fair. We'll do it to both sides. And what do you get, Jada? Okay, so if you go back to the top, you see the rate says a percent that's been changed to a decimal. We always want our rate to come out as a percentage. So what would that be if I changed that to a percentage, Jada? You are correct. All right, so the final answer is 2.5%. And that's our rate. Remember, always double check. You want your rate to come out as a percentage. All right, same idea on this one. As I walked around, I saw a lot of correct answers. So we're going to kind of go through this. I was 1750. P was 350. We are looking for the rate, and the time, thankfully, came to us in years, okay? So once again, I equals P times R times T. We've got 1750 equals 350 times the R times 2.5. I know that there's nothing I can do over here on the left side. Is there anything I can do on the right? Good job. We're always going to take these numbers and multiply them together. What do you get when you do 350 times 2.5? 875 times R. How do I get R by itself? Okay, you got to divide by whatever is there that's not allowing it to be alone. So divided by 875 on both sides. When you do that, what does R equal?
0.02.
Okay, 0.02. And then obviously we know we want that to be a percentage. So what would the answer be? 2%. Raise your hand if you got that correct all on your own. Excellent. All right, so this problem on the next page is very similar to what we've been doing once again, only this time, what are we going to be looking for? The time. I equals P, R, and T. I want you guys to plug those in and try it on your own. All right, guys, what's my I?
100.
What's my P?
800.
What's my R?
0.02.
Okay, so it was 2%, but you know it's 0.02, and we don't know the time yet, right? Okay, I equals P times R times T, so we're going to do 100 equals 800 times 0.02 times T. There is some work you can do on the right side. What is it?
800 times 2.
Good job. Multiply those numbers together, and what do you get? 16T. How do I get that T by itself? Okay, divide it by 16 on both sides. When you do that, what comes out? What's the answer?
6.25.
Okay, 6.25, and we always want units to be attached, so what's the answer? 6.25 years. How many of you got that correct?
I know I got the word problem right.
Yay! All right, how many of you made it to the last and final problem?
Can I say what I got? I got 100.
All right, modeling real life, you borrow $600 to buy a violin. The simple annual interest rate is 15%. You pay off the loan after 2 years. How much interest did you pay? This is a very normal real life scenario kind of problem, okay? So do we know the interest? No, that's what we're looking for. Do we know the principal?
Yes.
Yeah, we started off borrowing how much?
$600.
$600. Do we know the rate?
Yes.
Yep, they gave it to us at 15%, changed to a decimal. What would that be? 0.15. Okay, so always remember that's one of the biggest mistakes people will make. And finally, the time. How long did it take us to pay that back?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, so now we've got I equals P times R times T. We need 600 times 0.15 times 2. What do you get, guys? 180 is the interest. So here's the deal. You wanted that violin really bad, but in the end, you paid $780 for the violin because you had to pay interest, okay? So if you can pay cash for things, that's always going to be better because you won't pay money in interest. But if you can't and you really need something, going to the bank and getting a loan is always a great plan too, okay? All right, so this homework is not due tonight. It's going to be due a couple days from now, but you are allowed to get a head start on it. So right now I'm going to have you guys open up in Big Ideas and turn to section 6.6.